Do the screen share.
And now I have to do the screen share, and then we will get started. Okay, so here goes. Am I sharing the right screen? Yeah, you see the parasha? Good,
Yeah.
perfect. Okay, so let's do this. ויהי כי זקן ישחק, ותכהנה עיניו מרעות, ויקרא את עשיו בנו הגדול, ויאמר אליו בני, ויאמר אליו הנני, והבא קציב ישחק, וחיה עינוהי, ולמחזה, וכליית עשיו ברי רבה, ואמר ברי, ואמר האנה. Okay, so this is already towards the end of Yitzhak's life. He's already older, or at least so he thinks, because in reality, he's going to live many, many more years. So the pasuk says, "Vahiki zaken Yitzhak." What does it mean, "Vahiki zaken Yitzhak"? But in fact, he ends up living to the age of 180, right? And at this point in time, he has many decades to go. So, he began to lose his vision. His vision began to become dim and weak. And from his perspective, he felt like an old man. In reality, he had decades and decades of life. But in his mind, he was feeling like he is very old because he was losing his vision. And because he was losing his vision and he became a little more frail, he thought that the end is near. It wasn't. But because he thought that the end was near, he calls Esav, who is the oldest son, and he tells his son, please, he calls him over. He wants to, as any father, before the father passes away, he wants to speak to his children and kind of, give him the last message. So here's what Yitzhak wants to do with Esav now that he's getting older. Vayomer hinena zakanti lo yadati yom moti. And he says to his son Esav, I am old, right? Hinena zakanti, I have become an old man. And Lo yadati yomoti, I don't know when the day of death is going to arrive. So you see, he's thinking about that, mistakenly, but he's thinking about it. And because of that, Yitzhak begins a chain of events that characterize his future generations for eternity. Meaning, because of his feeling that he's old and because he decides to do what he's about to do now, he sets into motion an eternal struggle between Esav and Yaakov. So let's see how that eternal struggle unfolds and what takes place. And he says something strange to him. Yitzhak says something, and we read this parasha every year, and I'm telling you, you're going to see how this pasuk is strange. So let me read the ankelos on the previous pasuk. I don't believe I read it. Va'amar hachi'an sebit let anayada yomoti. Now pasuk gimel. I'm just checking to see. Ve'ata. Okay, good. Ve'ata sanach elecha telecha vekashtecha ve'seh hasade ve'sud ali sa'id. Uch'an sabki an zenach sefach vekashtach ufok lehakla vesud li seda. And he tells his son as following. Let me read the pesukim. I'm going to explain the pesukim, and then I'm going to go back and re-explain the pesukim. But he tells him, I want you to take your tools. By tools here, he means tools of hunting. Take your hunting tools. Specifically, there's a bow and there's the arrow. So when you have the bow and the arrow, you put the arrow in the quiver, right? So the arrow in Hebrew is called teliecha because you hang it on the back. And milashon litzlot, to hang. So teliecha is the arrow which goes into the quiver, right? The kashtecha, and of course take the bow. And I want you to go out into the field. Now, by field here, he actually means land, which is um, um, lawless. Sadeh means lawless land, meaning I want you to leave our neighborhood. I want you to leave our area and go out into those areas where, in a sense, not only there's lawlessness, but there is an element, of course, of danger. And I believe it was Rabbi Avraham ben Harambam who says, why is he telling his son to take these weapons of war? Because he's sending him into these places where Yitzhak was not in control. Because Yitzhak was a powerful man. He was wealthy. He had alliances. He's not sending him to his friends. He's not sending him down the block to the corner grocery store. He's sending him across the border. And because he's sending him across the border, he is telling him, take your weapons of war and go out and do the following. And I'm gonna go back and explain what's happening here, because this is very odd. Vaseli mat'amim ka'asher ahabti vehabi ali ve'ochela ba'avur tebarechecha nafshi ve'terem amut uch'an sabke an zenach sefach ve'kashtach ufok lehakla besudli sera va'abed li tafshilin kema dirhemi ve'eli ve'chol bedin. And he says, I want you to make me the delicacies that you know which delicacies I love. And bring these delicacies to me, because he's going to be hunting. He's going to be hunting the food. And when you hunt the food, I don't only want you to hunt the animal, but I want you to prepare the meat for me, and I'm going to eat it. And in this way, I'm going to have an opportunity to give you a beracha before I die. Okay, let's stop here. I want to first explain this last pasuk, and then I want to go back and explain the entire story, because this is very strange. But first of all, he says, I want you to prepare this delicious food for me, because I want to give you a beracha. So give him the beracha. Okay, give him a beracha. Imagine you feel old, and you feel you don't know, when it's going to be the end of your life, and you call your son to you, and you want to give him a beracha. So give him a beracha. He says, no. Before I give you the beracha, I want you to prepare for me delicious food. And the key to that is, he says, Ba'abur tebarechecha nafshi. I want my soul.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Sorry, apologies. Can you check the waiting room, please? I think Raymond Janani is trying to get in.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, wow. Yeah, I think you're right. How did I miss that? Just 1 second. Admit. Okay. Thank you for letting me know. All right. So he says, I want my nefesh to bless you. So let me explain to you what that's about. So on Yom Kippur, the pasuk says, Te'anu et nafshotechem. It doesn't say Te'anu et gufechem. It says Te'anu et nafshotechem. It doesn't say afflict your body, afflict your soul. That's strange. When I eat, I'm afflicting my body. Am I not? I mean, my body wants to eat and I'm not eating. But it says to afflict your nefesh, your soul. So what is that about? So there is within the nefesh, which is within the soul of a person, a mechanism that tells the person to do that which is good for the person. So the nefesh wants you to eat, and when you eat, you just did something good for yourself, and the nefesh feels a sense of calm, a sense of satisfaction. Similarly, when a person fasts, he's not only afflicting his physical body, but more significantly, he's afflicting his nefesh. Now, why do you do that on Kippur? You do that on Kippur because your nefesh, you're giving your nefesh a signal. What is a signal you're giving the nefesh? You're telling the nefesh, you're doing something wrong. You're sending me in the wrong direction, right? And therefore, what do? You afflict the nefesh, and in that way you're communicating with the nefesh. And now the nefesh feels the pain, and it wakes up, and if you have the right tefillot and you have the right state of mind, you can effectuate a transformation within your neshama. So the neshama affects how the person behaves, but the person in turn can communicate with the neshama and tell, I don't like where you're sending me. I don't like what you're telling me to do. So there's that dialogue going on. So now, the nefesh of a person is what stays of the person, because we know eventually the body does wither away, but we are less concerned with that because our existence continues, and the existence of the nefesh is greater than the existence of the body. So now, when when Yitzhak is asking to give a beracha for his son Esav, he wants his nefesh to give the beracha because he understands that the nefesh is what can effectuate the change in Esav. So it's not just, I'm giving you a beracha, my son, but he wants his nefesh to be engaged in that process, right? So it's almost like, when you pray and you're praying b'kavana and you engage part of your intellectual apparatus, your spiritual apparatus, you're engaging your nefesh in the tefillah. That's a proper tefillah. He wants to engage his nefesh in the beracha, because only by engaging his nefesh in the blessing and the beracha will the beracha have any meaning. And that's why he says, I want you, my son, to find the food and to prepare it for me as delicacies that the food that I love. I want you to prepare it for me, and I want to eat it from you, right? Because in that way, he creates a certain love and connection between himself and his son. And now when he eats the food and his nefesh feels, my son just gave me this delicious food, the nefesh wants to bless Esav for having given that delicious food. So you see what's happening here. It's not a simple point. It's very deep. And the idea here is, Yitzhak wants to give his son an eternal, meaningful beracha, and that can only come from the nefesh, from the soul, not just for thinking about it, but actually engaging his soul. So is this up to this? Is it clear?
It's clear, and I feel like it's similar to what we do today in society. You want to impress somebody, you want to impact somebody, you take them out, you buy them a gift. It could be you bring someone flowers, and you create a sort of connection and an openness.
Yeah, and it's true, by the way. The Chachamim say shemekarevet et haberiot, that if you want to bring closeness to somebody, then invite them over for a meal and feed them, because that really does create a certain sense of closeness. That is absolutely true. In fact, there is a special isur that the Chachamim made because of this. The isur of
100% of wine.
I'm sorry, which one?
I was going to say wine.
No. Wine is asur because they used to be menasechim the yain for avodah zarah. So that we have a reason to make it asur. And even the setam yanam is asur because it might be nisuch of avodah zarah. But bread, what's wrong with bread? Why may I not have bread of a goy? Let's say the goy baked the bread and it's kosher, it's kosher ingredients. So there's a difference between pat akum shel ba'al habayit and pat akum shel lahtom. let me explain the difference. If you're going to a bakery and you buy bread from a goy, from a bakery, the halacha is not so mahmir. It depends, the Harambam says depends on minhag makom. If minhag makom is not to eat pat akum, we don't eat pat akum from a bakery. If minhag makom is to eat pat akum from a bakery, you eat pat akum from a bakery. So there's many keilot that they used to eat pat akum. Other keilot didn't used to eat pat akum. But it's not such a big humrah. It's talui, it's dependent on the minhag. That's pat akum of the bakery. But then the Chachamim say, if it's pat akum of Ba'al Habayit, if it's bread baked in somebody's private house, you're not allowed to eat the bread from that person. Why? Because that's the power of the legima. If somebody gives you something to eat, mekarevet et beriot and bar minan, mishum hatnut, you may end up marrying his daughter. He may end up marrying your daughter. Why? What's a big deal? Because when you eat together and you have the festivity together, you're going to be eating his bread in his house. That will create a certain fondness and a certain attraction, right? So it's absolutely true. So that's just human nature. So that's human nature. Yitzhak recognizes his nature. He recognizes the fact that he has this nefesh, and he wants to give a meaningful beracha to his son. But now, I want to go back to the earlier pasuk. I'm going to ask the question. Yitzhak was a wealthy person, wasn't he? Yeah, he was. He was very wealthy. Okay. And not only was Yitzhak wealthy, what was his main occupation? Like his father. He was a shepherd. Exactly. It was a shepherd. He was a shepherd, correct. Let me ask you a question. What do shepherds own a lot of?
Flock.
Animals, right? Flock, sheep, goats, cows. Okay. So what I'm confused about here is why is he sending his son on this dangerous mission to the Sadeh, which is a lawless place, with his weapons of war to defend himself and to hunt animals? Just go to the backyard, pick a nice, juicy, Nebraska a cow or whatever they do nowadays to cows. I know that they have the Japanese cows where I think they give them some acupuncture. I don't know what they do, or massages, so that the meat comes out good. Agnew steak, is that what it's called?
Wagyu steak.
Wagyu. Thank you. Wagyu steaks. Yes, so the Wagyu steaks, right, where the meat is very tasty and succulent, and the cow lives a very good life. Also, I mean, I assume if the cow is getting massages when he's alive, he's probably thinking, "I hit the jackpot." Until he sees the shahita knife. But until that point, he's very excited. He's very happy. So why doesn't he go pick some good, a nice cow and give it to his father? Indeed, that's exactly what Yaakov Avinu did. Yaakov Avinu goes to the backyard, gets some good goat meat, prepares it, and that's it. So what is this exercise about? It's a good question, right? I haven't seen anybody ask it, by the way. But years ago, I was in Eretz Israel and I thought about it, and I figured it out. I was they said that Avirad Yisrael Hakimah. So when I used to live in Israel, I used to have great chidushim in Torah. Now I occupy myself by reading the chidushim that I used to write then. So I used to always, whenever I had a chidush, my father always used to tell me that you have to write down your chidushim because when you get older, you're going to forget it. And I thank him for telling me that because I look at the chidushim that I wrote when I lived in Israel and I really say, wow, that's good. So I'm like, I feel like I would have forgotten a lot of things. So it's really good that my father told me to write it down because I'd not written it down, I would have forgotten. So my father was good. He was good. He was right.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
So I understand the whole concept with the neshama, but how did Yitzchak even know he had one? Was it a concept at that time? Or we understand that from the Zohar, we understand it from the Kabbalah, and that's where we adapt it into our lives today. But at that time, did he know he had a neshama and he's actually addressing it and bringing it out for beracha?
Right. So what it appears is that Abraham Avinu had a certain knowledge, let's call it a type of Torah shebe'al peh. And
Mesorah, would you call it Mesorah?
Yeah, Masoret. They had a tradition of Torah shebe'al peh. part of it came from Adam Arishon, then part of it came from Shem, Va'ever, and there was a tradition of understanding the world and a tradition of understanding ourselves and our neshamot, and a lot of that was known to them. There's no question. Avraham Avinu himself, he reached tremendous wisdom and knowledge of God. Now, the greatest proof of this is that Hashem spoke to them, and they were prophets. And a prophet, by definition, is a person who has tremendous knowledge of such matters. So there's no question that they understood these matters very deeply and profoundly, probably much better than we do, right? So, okay, so let me go back to that idea. So the question is, what's happening with Yitzhak, and how is this all turning around? You know, Avraham is called Ish HaChesed. You know that, right? Ish HaChesed. Avraham Avinu is called the man of Chesed, of kindness. And Yitzhak is called Ish HaGevurot, the man of strength, right? Tremendous strength and courage. And I always wondered about that. But think of Yitzhak. Yitzhak is the son of Abraham. Now, Abraham, Hashem promised Avraham Avinu, Lezaracha eten et haaretz hazot. I'm going to give this land to your seed. Now, who is Abraham's seed? It's Ki beYitzhak yikareh lechazara. It's explicit, not Ishmael and not Bnei Apilakshim. It's Mefurash. Ki beYitzhak yikareh lechazara. When I'm talking about your seed, I'm talking about Yitzhak. So it's explicit right there. So we know who the seed of Abraham was. It was Yitzhak. So Yitzhak is Ish HaGevurot. So Yitzhak is he's great. You know, he's on top of the world. He's the son of Avraham Avinu. And the land is his. Avraham Avinu, the land wasn't his. Avraham Avinu, when Sarah died, Avraham Avinu had to implore the Hittites of Hebron to give him a burial plot. So Avraham Avinu was still a ger v'toshav, as he says, ger v'toshav anochi imachem. But Yitzchak, he was on top of the world. He's the son of Avraham. Eretz Yisrael belongs to him. And now I want to solve for you a great mystery. Here is the mystery. How is it that Yitzchak was fooled by Esav? So here's Yitzchak. He has these two sons. One of them is hairy, muscular, red, powerful. Let's call him Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's one son. And the other son, the other son is not an Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's a regular person. He's, like us, regular, not particularly hairy, not particularly muscular. And Yitzchak falls in love with Esav. Now really, how shallow? It's not. I'm saying this rhetorically, of course. How shallow is that? That's what you like? You like your son is like, muscles and, I don't know what he's doing. Weightlifting and, he's, bodybuilding. And Yitzchak says, yes, this is the Bechor. And he was a Bechor, by the way. Esav was a Bechor, but he's like, he has no problem with that. But Ye'ehav Yitzchak et Esav ki sayid befiv. Yitzchak loves Esav. He's a hunter. So again, how shallow is all of this? What is going on here? I figured it out. Yitzchak knows that he's the son. He's the one. He's the one who's conquering Israel. It's him. Abraham didn't do it. He, Yitzchak, will. He's the one. And suddenly he has this son at the age of 60. He has two sons, and one of them is huge, big, a warrior. And what is Yitzchak thinking? Yeah, this is the guy who is going to conquer Eretz Yisrael. Yaakov will be, of course, Yaakov and Esav are brothers. There's no contradiction. Yitzchak is not thinking in his wildest dreams that Esav is going to start another country, the Roman Empire, and Yitzchak and Yaakov is going to start the Jewish people. In Yitzchak's mind, they're both his sons, but it happens to be that the Bechor, that God gave him this Bechor, he's the one who's going to conquer Israel. He's a natural warrior. And that's why Yitzchak is called Ish HaGevurot. He wants to conquer Eretz Yisrael, and he wants to establish Malchut Bet David. He wants to establish the Bet HaMikdash and the Jewish nation. And here he has his son Esav, a sign from God. This is what God gave me. And he's so excited about this son, this unusual, genetically unusual a person called Esav who's going to do it for him. So it all fits in perfectly in Yitzhak's thinking. That's why Yitzhak is the only one who never leaves Israel. He's not afraid. He's not going anywhere. It's his country, you know? So now we understand a little about the psychological profile of Yitzhak and the way Yitzhak viewed Esav. So he wasn't just being shallow. He wasn't being shallow at all. He was being very intelligent and very practical. The same way the state of Israel. How was the state of Israel created? What was it created by? You know, a bunch of people sitting down around a table in a base midrash and reading the latest gossip of Yated Ne'eman. Which rabbi did we put in Cherem this week? Oh, wow, that rabbi is no good. Is that how the state of Israel was conquered? No, it was conquered by people going out and taking guns and learning how to shoot and going and blasting away the enemy. Obviously, it was conquered because God was gracious enough and kind enough to say, I want to save the Jewish people from themselves. So he helped us conquer the land of Israel. Let's call a spade a spade. We weren't such great warriors. But you get the idea. You have to have the ability to defend yourself and to conquer the land. So that's what Esav was. Esav was the army. He was the Jewish army, and Yitzchak loved it. He just loved it. So you got it? Okay, now go to the beracha. Now that I gave you that background, let's go understand the beracha. He wants his son, his firstborn son, his army, the one who's going to conquer Israel. He doesn't want to get a piece of meat from one of his own flock. He wants this guy to go out into the field, to go out into no man's land. He knows that Esav can defend himself. Nobody's going to touch Esav. The guy was powerful. He was a real warrior. The other guys were like wimps next to him. So he's telling Esav, go conquer the land. Go out to the land of Israel. I want a piece of meat from the land of Israel. I don't want a piece of meat from my flock. Go find me, an ibex or something. I don't know, some wild animal, and bring it here. That's what he wants. And that's what's going to make his nefesh happy. My nefesh is going to be so happy that my son is going out into Israel, and the Canaanite nations can't do a thing. He's one guy. The guy's a one-man warrior, right? Nobody can touch him. Nobody can touch him. He's going to go hunt the animal, bring the animal back to me, and I'm going to eat it, and I'm going to enjoy it because it comes from my land. It comes from Eretz Yisrael, and it was given to me with the sword. This is the way we conquer Israel. And this is what Yaakov Avinu says, Ki beharbi, right? He says before he dies in Perashat Vayechi, this is Yaakov Avinu speaking, not Yitzchak. Yaakov Avinu has the same vision, only Yaakov Avinu already realized it's not going to happen in his generation. It only happens in the days of Yoshua Binu. But when he speaks to his son Yosef, he says, all right, one second. Give me a moment. Right, Be'ata meta alai Rachel. Just one moment. Okay. Right. Okay. I lost the place. Give me a moment. Yeah. Right. Ve'ani natati lecha shechem echad al achecha. I don't have the pasuk, but when he's giving his Yosef the special extra portion in the land of Israel, he says, here it is. I'm going to give you an extra portion of the land of Israel. I took it from the Emori with my sword and my keshet. Now, what does he say here? Look at the pasuk. Oh, I see I'm not sharing the screen anymore. Well, I will reshare it. Just one second. Where is it? Here it is. Here we go. Okay.
The side point, just because you mentioned it, who are the Hittim?
The Hittites, where they were known nation. They were an Indo-European nation that lived in Israel at the time, and it's a historical fact. We know a lot about the Hittim from a historical perspective. We know a lot about them. But here is the pasuk that I want to show you here. Look, he says, Yaakov Avinu says, that's Yitzhak speaking to Esav, right? This pasuk. And when Yaakov speaks, Asher lakachti beharbi, which is teliecha. Teliecha is the quiver that you put the sword in. Bekashtecha. So you see that idea of conquering Israel from the enemy. That's what it's there for. And that's where Yitzhak is going to get the special pleasure in his nefesh. He's going to have such special pleasure that his son is powerful and is conquering the land and is taking the fruit of the land and bringing it back to his father. That's why hunting was so important for Yitzhak. It ended up he was mistaken. I mean, he was mistaken. But that was his vision. That was his vision. That's why he saw things. So he didn't realize that really the land of Israel doesn't go to the hunter, but it goes to Yaakov Avinu, right? So that's what is taking place here. So I see we have another 6 minutes. Any questions before we go to the next pasuk?
I mean, can I just say one thing?
Yes.
It's hard for me to, first of all, I see the Peshat in everything you're saying. It's clear, it's obvious. It's just hard for me to accept it because I think of Yitzchak being raised in the Bayit of Abraham Avinu, where he was, proselytizing. He was, quote unquote, teaching Torah, teaching Devar Hashem. And to make him, and again, it fits in the Peshat. I don't say no. It's just hard for me to understand that he didn't see a deeper Misorah. He didn't have a deeper Misorah. And that he was just focused on the material, on the conquering versus the, the spiritual side of receiving the land, which Yaakov apparently tapped into on some level. I mean, clearly they had to conquer the land. I get that. Anyway, I don't know if there's an answer to that. It's just...
Yeah, oftentimes the sons, they tend to supplement their fathers. And sometimes the father emphasizes one thing, whereas the son emphasizes something else. It happens all the time. So Talmidei Chachamim and their sons, and even me and my father, we would oftentimes have our debates and discussions, and he would have one position and I would have another position. It wasn't necessarily contradictory, but it was, it looked at things a little differently at times, not all the time. Now here we see Abraham is called Ish HaChesed, because he didn't emphasize this whole thing of conquering the land. Now Yitzchak probably saw what happened to his father. He probably saw how his father didn't have a place to bury his mother. And it upset him. He didn't like what he saw. But at the same time, he accepted it. But now that he's in charge, that's not going to happen again. When it comes time to visit, when it comes time for him, he's sending out his sons, and they're going to go, and they're going to do what they need to do to conquer the land. And they're not going to be embarrassed. They're not going to be Abraham Isha Chesed, come into my tent, everybody's invited, marhaba. This guy is sending his son out into the field to hunt and to kill. Okay, that's what he's doing. Was he wrong? Was he right? I can understand him. Now, you think I'm making this up? Look at the sons of Yaakov Avinu, Shimon and Levi. Look how they behave with the people of Shechem. The people of Shechem take their sister Dinah. And listen, that was the way it was done back then. That wasn't anti-Semitism. That's just the way it was done. We like to say, oh, you're being anti-Semitic. Not everything is anti-Semitism. Some things are. Some things are. That wasn't. What do they do? What do? They go and they kill everybody. They massacre the whole city. Where did they learn to massacre the whole city? Who taught them? Did they learn that from their father, Yaakov Avinu? Is that where they learned it from? Take a guess. Who do you think they learned it from? Did they learn it from Lavan, their grandfather? Their grandfather was, he didn't have to massacre nobody. Who do you think? Take a guess. Who do you think they learned it from? They learned it from their uncle, Esav. That's their hero. They learned it from their uncle. That's the way their uncle was. Right? 1 second. Yeah. Again, it says that Shimon and Levi, Lakhu ish harbo. Again, the same word cherev, right here, teliecha. They're taking out the cherev. Where did they learn to take the cherev out and go massacre people? They learned it from Esav. You understand? So you see, it all ties in very nicely. So here's a story. Now, was Yitzhak entirely mistaken? No, I don't think so. I think at the end we see that you need to have the ability, the physical ability to conquer the land. You need that, and that's what happens in the days of Yehoshua bin Nun. But the point is, Yehoshua bin Nun, the one who ultimately conquers Israel, he was a great Talmid Chacham. He was the student of Moshe Rabbeinu, one of the greatest Nevi'im, one of the greatest Chachamim that we ever had. Right? He was Moshe Rabbeinu's star pupil. I mean, forget it. He was at the highest level. But he was also a great warrior. The mistake, if we can call it mistake, humbly, and chas v'shalom, not in a critical way, but if we can say maybe Yitzchak's, what he overlooked was he was so excited that Esav was this muscular, huge creature that he overlooked the fact that Esav apparently was not the greatest Talmid Chacham in the world. That's what it looks like. He knew Torah, by the way, he knew Torah. The guy was smart. He knew Torah. But the emphasis was on war. Esav knew Torah. He knew Torah very well, right? In Yeshua bin Nun, the emphasis was on the Torah, not on the war. He knew war, and he was a great warrior, but the emphasis was on the Torah. In Esav, he knew Torah, but the emphasis was on the war. And that's the mistake that Yitzhak made. The mistake was that he emphasized the wrong thing. Esav emphasized the wrong thing. You understand? We need both. We need Torah. We need war. What's the ikar? The ikar is the Torah. Both are important, but the ikar is the Torah.
It almost sounds like you're saying Yitzchak made the mistake. And I'm sorry to harp on this, because as children, we sort of observe our parents and we run with what they give us or what we observe. Like maybe from what you're saying, because he was Givurah, he emphasized that, and that's what Esav took was his takeaway from what was the Ikad. Anyway, I don't want to get too bogged down.
We don't know. The Torah doesn't tell us that much. We know what we know.
Just an interesting thought.
Yeah, we know what we know. We know what the Torah tells us. But nevertheless, it is interesting.